Sports is now constantly in the news headlines, whether it is domestic violence,
the NFL again reeling from the fallout from the Ray Rice brutal beating video,
or head injuries.
Aaron Rodgers, the concussion last week.
Sports is big money and recession-proof.
It is a new contract for quarterback Tony Romo in Dallas.
In the next half hour, we examine 4 major issues in spiraling out of control when sports becomes the lead story. This program examines domestic violence, concussions, paying college athletes, and the financial impact of the sports world on society.
Another scandal for the National Football League breaking overnight. One of its brightest stars has been charged.
Many professional athletes, such as Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, and Floyd Mayweather, are household names, but some of their notoriety is for the wrong reasons.
According to the CDC, nearly 1 in 3 American women will have experienced some form of domestic abuse.
the NFL again reeling from the fallout from the Ray Rice brutal beating video. Now another scandal emerging. One of the league's premier players, Adrian Peterson, indicted for child abuse.
Now, outside the lines reached out to all 5 of the women Mayweather is either convicted of or accused of assaulting.
The National Football League used to have a good name.
While some can laugh, growing concerns persist about a variety of sports issues topping the news headlines, including entitled athletes doing what they want and getting away with it, of the aggressive nature of sports bleeding into personal lives, and as Tennessee State University sports journalism professor Tommy Boris adds, domestic violence involving athletes becoming more prevalent.
I think we're hearing about more of them because now victims are more likely to come out in public because they feel like, at least in some cases, that they have a better chance of being believed. And I think social media has a lot to do with that, too.
Some question whether the number of incidents of domestic violence involving athletes has risen, or, as Tennessee State University Athletics Director Teresa Phillips wonders, has the reporting of incidents by the media increased?
I think one of the good things that is happening is the technology that we have really now tells a story that maybe was being hidden before. You have the cameras in the elevators, cameras out on the streets, people with cell phones who will just start recording.
Dr. Rich Tyner offers a unique perspective as a professor, sports announcer, and faculty representative to athletics at Belmont University. He says we teach athletes to be very aggressive on the field and then turn it off. He does not excuse the behavior, but acknowledges that we nurture it by sending mixed messages.
From a very young age that we teach little boys to hit harder on the football field. We sort of encourage and celebrate that aggressive behavior in a sports context and then expect a child or a young person or even an adult just to be able to turn it off.
TSU Athletic Director Teresa Phillips believes in second chances. But with third and fourth opportunities, these exceptions hurt the athlete and surrounding environment.
And you're really creating that monster that now thinks, hey, they're above the law. There are exceptions that are made for me. The adoration that we put on them, the role models that whether they want to be that or not, they have to be held to a standard that this is completely and totally unacceptable.
The high-profile Vanderbilt rape case begins Monday, and we know
domestic violence cases are not just prevalent among professional athletes. Embroiled over the last couple of years in a high-profile rape case, Vanderbilt University Athletic Director David Williams says the victim, of course, includes the female student, but also the athletes, the athletic department, and the university.
You try to take it to some degree as a teaching moment and try to make some positive out of it. You hate for it to go to that level before the positive comes out.
Count 1, we find Mr. Vanderberg guilty of aggravated.
One thing I have noticed is that type of behavior, more likely than not, is accompanied with alcohol. I know very little of situations where alcohol wasn't part of it.
Williams says they have programs for educating student athletes about what is consent, but he also says we have to understand the culture of many athletes and the baggage they bring to campus.
Kids of today don't necessarily date like kids of 15, 20 years ago. And until you understand this, the concept of what they call hooking up, until you understand that, you're going to be fighting upstream.
Williams says, in addition to educational programs, they partner with the YWCA and the Campus Women's Center, while he, too, delivers his own message.
I try to talk to the young men in a very simple sort of thing of saying, every woman is somebody's sister, mother, daughter. And do you have a sister, mother, or daughter? And it at least stops them to think about it. We should recognize the fact that because we are in a high-profile industry, if you like, or activity, we'll get called out more than other people. But by the same token, we should use that to try to teach and educate and influence.
TSU's Phillips says the solution will start with the young male athletes.
Men standing up and saying this is wrong, and I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to cover it for my male counterparts, and that men will demand that other men treat women in a respectful manner.
Aggressive play calling by the Titans.
When I played, it affected me, but at the same time, you kind of played through it at the time, but really, ultimately, what caused me to retire.
One of the challenges with diagnosing concussion is that the patient looks normal from the outside.
First down and 10, Kansas State on the quarterback draw. Oh, my gosh! And a fumble, and Texas Tech got it back.
We've all heard the term athletes today are bigger, stronger, faster.
Aaron Rodgers, the concussion last week.
Concussions have become a serious issue, not only for the National Football League, but for college and youth programs, and it is not just limited to football. An estimated 10 to 19% of all athletes participating in contact sports suffer a concussion each season, prompting athletes, medical staffs, coaches, and trainers to take notice.
Reggie Bush, Breeze swings it out to Bush, and the ball is knocked away, and a crunching hit put on by Sheldon Brown, and Bush takes a while to get up.
More than 2,000 former NFL players recently filed a lawsuit accusing the league of concealing information linking football-related injuries to long-term brain damage.
Still stopping.
Go, go!
Oh my gosh!
Several former professional football players have committed suicide or died after long battles of mental illness, in which repeated concussions caused brain damage, as noted in this report from ESPN.
The multiple on-field concussions suffered by former NFL safety Andre Waters led to his depression and his suicide.
With a variety of symptoms, it is understandable why some athletes do not know the severity of such a head trauma.
On a quick throw, and a stamp on T.J. Hushmanzada. David Barrett with the smack, and Hushmanzada is laid out.
One research study shows former NFL players had a 37% greater chance of developing Alzheimer's disease than the general public. Frank Wycheck played for 11 seasons, 9 of those with the Houston Oilers Tennessee Titans franchise. Wycheck says awareness of head trauma increased in the mid-1990s when Super Bowl quarterbacks Troy Aikman and Steve Young were knocked out of games. Wycheck says it is a concern after he, too, suffered multiple concussions.
Yeah, it is a worry. It really is. Deep down inside, when I put my head on a pillow at night, sometimes I think about it, and it's not good.
According to the National Institute of Health, a concussion is a short loss of normal brain function in response to a head injury. Dr. Alan Sills, an associate professor of neurological surgery at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, says experts rely on several methods for diagnosing a concussion.
One is what the patient's telling us, what the symptoms are. And so we ask them about things such as headache and feeling foggy, and if they have sensitivity to light or noise, weakness, numbness, and tingling, these types of things. The second thing we do is we'll put them through a short battery of tests looking at their attention, their concentration, and memory, because we know those are factors that are often affected by concussion. And the third thing is we can do some assessments of some of their neurologic function, like their balance and their motor skills, because those things are often affected as well.
Former Titan Frank Wycheck says the NFL has made progress examining this issue.
At least from the prevention point of view, I think they're taking the right step as far as keeping some guys out, having the baseline test. There are all the things that are the baby steps in this.
One study showed 23% of retired NFL players suffered depression, and 17% had severe memory impairment. Once again, former Titans tight end Frank Wycheck.
I think any player who's played a long time can actually tell you that they've had multiple. It's just they were just not diagnosed or reported. And I think nowadays, I think more attention's being brought on the injury and the subject, and there's more sensitivity to it.
The media is also drawing more attention to this issue. In this instance, Al Michaels on NBC's Sunday Night Football talks with colleagues Chris Collinsworth and Andrea Kramer about Green Bay quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who sat out a game due to a concussion.
It's the second concussion that he sustained this season. And last week, he didn't slide, went head first, got tackled
at the end of the first half in Detroit. Has to go through a battery of tests. There's a whole new protocol now in the NFL. Didn't pass.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy said that in another era of the concussion syndrome, he probably would have been playing in this one.
When Mike McCarthy talked to Rodgers on Tuesday, McCarthy thought he'd be able to play tonight, but Rodgers later developed a headache. Now the headaches continued through Thursday, and he was sent home from the facility both days. He was feeling better on Friday and began lobbying to play, but was ruled out yesterday. Now I talked to Rodgers before the game, and he said he didn't have any symptoms, but he wasn't sure how the lights and the noise might affect him. The bottom line, he still has tests to pass before he'll be cleared to play.
For a player like Aaron Rodgers to return to action, the NFL protocol now calls for no symptoms while resting after exercise. The athlete must pass a computer-based neurological test and must be cleared with a team physician along with an independent neurologist. There is also more research, including one study by Keenan Brown, a doctoral student at the University of Alabama. Brown and his colleague Ray Harrison conducted a content analysis of New York Times articles covering the concussion issue from May 2001 until October 2010. Their results show an increase of media coverage of concussions in the NFL.
The numbers are staggering about it. I think we found almost a 4 to 5 time the amount of articles in 2008 and 2007, and that became a steady trend up until the present time.
On the ground, what about that hit? A big pop as Allen Irvin got welcomed by Roderick Johnson
from Oklahoma State.
Of course, this is not just a matter for professional athletes. Vanderbilt University head athletic trainer Tom Bossing and Dr. Alan Sills agree that unlike the visible elements of an injury like bruising or swelling with an ankle sprain, concussions are different.
With those types of injuries, you have treatment, you have rehab, you have exercises that you can do, you have medicines you can take. You can't do that with a concussion.
Someone can have a very severe brain injury and look normal. They walk around, they move, their eyes are moving together, they're speaking. So it does present a bit of a challenge.
Vanderbilt's Tom Bossing says they check helmets each day.
It's kind of like saying, well, just because you wear your seatbelt every time you get in a car doesn't mean you're not going to get hurt if you get in a car wreck. That's how it's a lot of times in football it's compared to. It's a car wreck out there. It's a 20-mile-an-hour car wreck. Despite having the best equipment available, despite using the proper techniques for tackling and blocking, despite making sure that everything you can control is what it should be, you're still going to have concussions.
There was a personal foul on the defense, helmet-to-helmet contact.
Experts agree our single best defense is education. Parents, coaches, and medical personnel should all know how to recognize a concussion and have an action plan in place. Still, Vanderbilt's Tom Bossing says,
sometimes it doesn't matter. The right hit at the right time in the right spot, you're going to have a concussion. There's not a whole lot else you can do about it.
In order for all to be safe, Dr. Alan Sills says we need proper fitting equipment with athletes using the correct techniques. He cites a need for athletic trainers at all high schools, which Sills says is a key piece to the puzzle in trying to provide optimal care for athletes.
By far, the best prevention strategy for preventing severe injuries is to make sure that a player who's had a minor brain injury doesn't go back and receive another blow until they fully recover. One of the things we don't want to do is to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour immediately. We've got to bring the athlete back in a stepwise fashion.
The NFL has made changes, including measures designed for player safety. These include new rules regarding helmet-to-helmet collisions and changes in kickoffs to reduce high-velocity tackles. Former Titan Frank Wycheck says he worries about his quality of life 10 to 20 years from now.
From paying attention to the sporting world, just when someone gets a concussion, and whether it be in hockey, football, whatever it may be, just you worry about it. And anytime an injury comes up or something happens to a football player that for whatever reason commits suicide or someone that has bouts with depression, and you always hear those bad stories, it comes to my mind is that, what can I do from now until that point that I can prevent something?
Medical experts say the challenge is to keep getting the word out so parents, coaches, and trainers understand the treatment process to make sure these measures are implemented at all levels of competition.
Add Adrian Peterson to the list of people who believe NCAA athletes should be paid.
In the book, Calipari argues the NCAA will collapse unless it reforms.
For many, those reforms call for paying college athletes, and Kentucky basketball coach John Calipari is not alone. South Carolina football coach Steve Spurrier has led this charge for years. Now, more are chiming in. In a recent article, the Tennessean reports Middle Tennessee State University and other Conference USA schools are prepared to pay student athletes a full cost of attendance, over $2,000 per athlete beyond their athletic scholarship, following the lead of the Power 5 conferences, pushing for autonomy within the NCAA. But many schools say paying athletes is not feasible.
I would argue the student athletes that participate in Division I actually receive a beautiful benefit in their education.
Commissioner of the Ohio Valley Conference, Beth DeBush, says a full athletic scholarship affords students the ability to graduate from a fine institution.
If we look at it from a sustaining model, revenue in Division I is overplayed. It's focused on select institutions and select conferences. There are 32 conferences in Division I, and the majority of those really are managed in a way to provide students an opportunity to expand their education through participation.
As a former student athlete who played college football, Austin Peay State University Athletic Director Derek Vandermeer argues against pay-for-play.
Many people would like to argue that football is this exception, but structurally, colleges and universities are primarily structured to support an academic mission, and that academic mission mandates that we fully support all of our programs, whether it's golf or rowing or tennis or football or basketball. If you look at over 1,000 Division I institutions, only roughly 16 to 20 institutions are what you consider profitable. This perception that there's this great glut of revenue that is available, it can be used for this model, doesn't work.
While many are for paying college athletes, Tennessee State University head football coach Rod Reed does not see the need.
I think you can open up a whole can of worms that don't need to be opened. I think these kids are getting their college education paid for.
UT Martin offensive lineman Charles Sweeten, a senior from Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, says athletes should not be paid.
Going to school, that's your payment. You know, it's a little harsh, but what's the difference between college athletes taking out a loan and somebody that works a 40-hour job a week and having to take out a loan?
Despite what some say, a majority of Division I schools could not afford to pay athletes. This includes Tennessee Tech Athletic Director Mark Wilson, who says they would run a budget deficit if they were paying college athletes.
Their scholarships that they get, and I think that's pretty significant, and that's what college athletics was built upon, providing young men and young women an opportunity to receive a degree from an institution of higher education while having the opportunity to play Division I athletics.
Of course, there are always unexpected expenses, such as the athlete who can't fly home when there is a death in the family because that expense is not part of the scholarship. Tech Athletic Director Mark Wilson says there are ways to help with incidents like this.
Of course, a lot of our student athletes are fairly local to the state of Tennessee. We find ways to use the Student Athlete Opportunity Fund to help students that need that.
There are those who see the other side of this issue. Tennessee State University professor Tommy Boris teaches sports journalism. He says when people see the huge television rights fees paid, he wonders where is the trickle down to the players.
I don't know that people should really have a big problem with it. I know people do because they consider student athletes amateurs, but with that kind of money around, it's hard to keep your amateur status.
Vanderbilt University Athletic Director David Williams does not refer to it as pay for play, instead using this example. Williams says if the cost of attendance at State U is $27,000 and the value of the scholarship is $24,000, this allows the schools in the Power 5 conferences to go up to that $27,000, with the difference coming in a variety of ways.
It could be done in a cash stipend to the student athlete. It may be in more expenses paid. It could be, we will pay for you to go home 2 or 3 times a year.
In a possible response to the controversy surrounding college athletes getting paid, 3 schools, Texas A&M, Northwestern, and Arizona, have decided to sell more generic jerseys as opposed to jerseys associated with individual players.
Austin Peay State University defensive lineman Corey Teague, a junior from Laverne, Tennessee, says he really does not think about getting paid, but he understands the view of some players who do not make money when their jerseys are sold.
If you're using my name and that number and that jersey, because every athlete works hard to get that jersey, to earn it, I can see them being irritated for not getting compensated for it.
The undefeated Northwestern Wildcats.
Today has been a huge success for not only Northwestern football players, but for college players around the nation.
We have seen many athletes go from being unknown to become superstars. But, as we learn in this excerpt from ESPN, We have never seen a college athlete join forces with a union.
Huddling with United Steelworkers, as Northwestern University quarterback Kane Coulter did in January.
TSU professor Tommy Boris considers the viability of the unionization of college athletes as brought to light by Northwestern.
If the 5 power conferences can come up with some kind of an agreement to where they give student athletes a stipend, I don't think the union issue is going to be an issue.
But what does this mean for athletes in non-revenue generating sports? OVC Commissioner Beth DeBush says it is important for every school to have a level of balance in the benefits provided to student athletes in order for a school to have both a comprehensive athletic program and gender equity.
Any reaction to give students benefit is going to have to be done in a more global fashion.
Commissioner DeBush adds the autonomy package to let the 5 power conferences and their supporting institutions consider independent legislation primarily focuses on spending on behalf of student athletes.
I wouldn't be surprised if you'd see an expansion to go up to cost of attendance for those students, and then the ability for the remaining conferences to adopt legislation to support a cost for attendance model.
Our score from Chapel Hill. The Tar Heels on Saturday defeat Middle Tennessee State in their home opener 40-20.
Will paying college athletes create an even greater divide between the haves and the have-nots? TSU professor Tommy Boris thinks so.
It's really not fair to put UT Knoxville and Tennessee Tech in the same category. They don't play the same level. They never have and they never will.
Watson Brown is the head football coach at Tennessee Tech. He has worked as a head coach at a variety of FCS and FBS schools, including Vanderbilt, Rice, and Cincinnati. Brown says this is a difficult issue for him, as he is not against athletes getting paid. However, since the advent of the BCS, he worries when, in basketball, smaller schools have made it to the Final Four, that such balance is not the same in college football.
Talking about what maybe they deserve, I've always thought a little spending money would not hurt for these kids. But if everybody can't do it, I just don't see how it's fair to let part of them do it.
Brown adds, the college athlete gets so much more than the average student.
There's so much that they get from being a football player. I think we're leaving some of those things and heading in another direction. But at the same time, when an athlete says, all these dollars are being made off of me playing, there is truth to that.
Watson Brown was also an athletic director at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. He sees the increasing division between schools with larger budgets and those barely in the black.
The further this thing goes, the more dollars they make, the less dollars everybody else makes. I said when the BCS started, I thought that it would end up being a Big 3, Big 4, Big 5, and it's starting to be that way completely.
Vanderbilt's David Williams says it is important for all to work together so you don't create a gap.
We still are all in Division I. If you think of the SEC now, where we'll play 8 SEC football games and then we'll play one within the Big Four, we're still looking to play 3 games outside of that. And so, no, these are still our sister universities, and I think we all need to work hard to make sure it doesn't create a big gap.
Austin Peay State University Athletic Director Derek Vandermeer says if we don't want to have an educational model working with college athletics, then we need to have a minor league.
We can't play in education and think that we can have a semi-professional sort of structure and system where we have compensation and contracts and collective bargaining. Either we're education or we're not.
Vanderbilt AD David Williams says cost of attendance means it is important to not lose sight of the college athletic experience.
The primary purpose for these young people to be on this campus is to get an education. And that doesn't change the fact that they may have aspirations of playing college sports or going to the pros. But I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we stay closely linked to the education missions of the universities.
In an NCAA report, expert John Dennis presented findings from his survey at the Ed O'Bannon trial last year, reported by CBS. Dennis showed 69% opposed to paying money to student athletes on college football and men's basketball teams, in addition to covering their college expenses. For every argument that Johnny Manziel made Texas A&M money, hurdles remain for all involved to make pay-for-play a fiscal reality in college sports.
Justin Verlander's new contract.
Salaries for athletes continue to skyrocket. We hear it in media reports on a constant basis.
Justin Verlander, extension in total could be worth $202 million.
It is a new contract for quarterback Tony Romo in Dallas. I'm told this deal will average between $17 and $18 million a year. Albert Pujols, now with the Angels, for $254 million.
Soaring salaries have piqued the interest of some sports media experts.
While the economy worldwide has kind of gone down, the economy for sports television is just going out of sight.
I'm seeing a shift where teams are having a harder time selling tickets because people can watch it at home.
So it's an issue that's certainly going to have to be dealt with soon.
And it is not just salaries for male athletes.
Watch Danica Patrick. They made a decision to try.
Race car driver Danica Patrick earned $12 million just 2 years ago, according to Forbes magazine. It is evidence that in the economic equation, sports plus money equals many athletes, coaches, and media companies are recession-proof.
The cost to air a single 30-second ad during the Super Bowl this year has jumped to $3.8 million. Want to know
Several networks have expanded sports coverage, paying increasing rights fees for events, including the Olympics. Meanwhile, the NFL is more profitable than ever, and businesses are paying for multi-million-dollar Super Bowl ads. Tommy Boris, an assistant professor teaching sports journalism at Tennessee State University, says people want more sports.
You've got 24-hour cable networks that have to fill their time with something, and when you've got that kind of supply and demand, sports people are going to win, and they've been winning huge, and of course this trickles down to athletes and coaches.
We have seen a shift in the economics of sports. Teams once relied heavily on ticket sales, but now the largest slice of the pie comes from media advertising, according to Rich Tyner, professor of media studies at Belmont University. Tyner uses the NFL's Tennessee Titans as an example.
I did the math of estimating the amount of revenue for the Titans based on season tickets, the number of seats, the average ticket price. It doesn't come anywhere close to paying the bills in professional sports. The fact that it's advertising that's funding it makes it less susceptible to declines in the economy.
Athletes and networks aren't the only ones who are recession-proof. You also have the football and basketball coaches.
The average coach in the whole football bowl subdivision is over $1 million, and in the BCS.
So UCLA tabs New Mexico's Steve Alford as their new head coach to replace Ben Howland. Receives a 7-year contract worth a total of $18.2 million. That's
TSU professor Tommy Boris cites numerous coaches currently making $3 to $5 million per year.
It can now be justified because a lot of colleges, especially the BCS type schools, are going to be getting $24 million, $25 million a year just from their current contract.
Austin Peay State University sports journalism professor Barry Gresham says despite sky-high salaries, salary caps in many leagues, and performance-enhancing drug issues, attendance has been up.
Everything you think might lead to a change or a dip in attendance or issues with fans coming to the ballpark, we haven't seen it. So everything you logically would think would happen has not been the case so far.
Fans will always want to attend the games, but high ticket, concession, and parking prices mean the demand for tickets may decrease. The result? TSU professor Tommy Boris says the home media experience is hard to beat.
If you've got a 60-inch high-definition TV, the question is now, why would you want to go to a game in person? Unless you have a real interest in being there. You go to one game, but you only get the one game. But if you're at home, you not only have the convenience of being home, you get to watch every other game if you want to.
Tyner and Boris agree. The money question is, for some, not so much about the fan that can't afford the ticket. It is those who are upset with skyrocketing salaries for players and coaches, along with the off-the-field poor behavior of some athletes that is a turnoff.
Because I just don't think you're going to be seeing the kinds of dollars coming from advertisers that we've been seeing.
But for the average fan, someone who just wants to go to a game, I think that person is going to be sitting at home in the next 2 or 3 years and will probably never see the inside of a stadium anywhere, and that would be terrible.
Some don't blame the players, citing that team owners and networks make far more than the athletes. Others say a reduction in player salaries is necessary. It is likely inflated paychecks for athletes will be a continuing trend. It is the way many organizations do business, by profiting from their player performance, television, and endorsement deals. You've been listening to Spiraling Out of Control, when sports becomes the lead story. I'm Terry Likes.